Okay, good morning, everyone. Are we good? Yeah, we're good. I want to start today by sharing with you a little story about me in my teenage years. Now, I moved to Chatham when I was about 11, I think it is when we moved. And I moved there with my mum, my big brother, big sister, and twin brother. And we were there for about a couple of years before I was willing to try the youth group at the church. Because I was a bit stubborn, I didn't want to go. It's always like a little bit of a joke now that I paid up so much to go in and then I ended up leading that youth later in life. But I started going to the youth group when I was about 13. And of course, it's one of those ones when you actually go, you end up loving it. So I then spent most of my Friday nights down at Chatham Evangelical Church at the youth group there, and loved it. And this one Friday, I was out the front of the church, waiting for my friends to arrive. And as I was, as I was waiting, this group of girls came up the road. And I didn't think anything of it, because you know, it's Friday night, young people were out, so they walked up the road. But then all of a sudden, they stopped right in front of me. And then one of them stepped forward and said, "We've had enough of you." I think that's a little word for the record, but "We've had enough of you. You're always hanging around with Andy. Well, you need to dump him because we want to go out with him, so you need to back off and move aside." And at that, she slapped me full pelt round the face. And I'm like, what? Now, while this is happening, there was somebody else at the doorway of the church. They saw that happened. They ran into the church and they shouted, "Someone just slapped Becky! Someone just slapped Becky!" And within seconds, and I mean seconds, all the youth group were out standing beside me. The youth leaders stood each side of me. They came around me. The girls started to back off. And then one of my friends said, "For the record, Andy is her twin brother, not her boyfriend." True story. I was threatened off my own twin brother. And it just so you know, nothing to do with the preach, but a couple of weeks later, Andy did start dating the girl that slapped me around the face. Thank you very much, Andy. But I tell that story because you see, there I had power because of the people I positioned myself with. Because of my crowd, if you like, because of who I was doing life with. When I was attacked, within seconds, they were there. They stood around me. The youth leaders literally put a wall in front of me. One of the youth leaders was very protective of us, and she looked at the girls and went, "You are banned for life!" True. They did actually end up coming to the youth and they started dating Andy, but it's all a bit of a tension thing, but we won't mention that at the moment. But they were there. They stood with me. And my question today is, who's standing with you? Who have you positioned yourself with? Who is your crowd? Your crowd may be your family, your workplace. It may be full of people you love. Your crowd may last years and years and years. Or your crowd may be people you've just met. The crowd may be those that you can see and feel, or your crowd may be people you see through a screen. Your change, the people you position with, can change from the school gate to the fishing lake, to those in Morrison's, Aldi's, or hanging around downtown. Your crowd may be us, Grace Community Church. It may be friends, strangers, believers or non-believers, your neighbours. Your crowd may be built with everything that I've said so far, but my question remains, who is in your crowd? Who have you positioned yourself with? Now, to understand the importance of a crowd in our lives and who we are positioning ourselves with, I want us to look at a story in the Bible where we see different crowds and the effects that they have. We are going to be looking at the story of Jairus today, and his story can be found in 3 of the Gospels, but we're going to be following it today in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. So it's Mark 5, starting at verse 21. So let's read the story first. It says, "When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, A large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be made well and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around them, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his cloth, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was free from her suffering. At once Jesus realised the power had gone from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched me?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you asked, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet with trembling and fear. Told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead." How to break it nice and easily, okay? "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? This child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he told the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha Koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. Jesus gave strict orders not to tell anyone about this and told them to give her something to eat. Alright, so here is the story of Jairus, and we're going to be looking at who he positions himself with, the crowds that are represented in this story, and how they can inspire us to keep check of the crowds around us and the influence they have. Now, the first crowd I want to look at isn't actually mentioned in this story, because the first crowd is who Jairus was positioning himself with before this encounter ever happened. You see, we are told Jairus was a synagogue leader, a religious leader, which sadly in Jesus' time didn't have a great level. One commentator, when talking about the religious leaders of Jesus' time, stated, "Sadly, many times they would miss the point and focus too much on works and rituals than they did on growing a loving relationship with a God who desires covenant relationship." The pastor of Mount Ridge Church in America states, the religious leaders missed Jesus. They were paid to read scriptures and know about the Messiah coming to save them. They studied the scriptures. They had more knowledge than anyone else about the Messiah coming. But they missed him. They missed him as a baby. They missed him as an adult. They missed him as the Messiah. Instead of seeing Jesus as the Son of God, they saw Jesus as a distraction, a rival. So they killed Jesus. Why? They were deeply in love with their stuff, their money, titles, looking good to others, power. That's why Jesus said to them, you like to appear righteous in public, but God knows your hearts. What this world honours is detestable in the sight of God, and that can be found in Luke 16. So you see, the religious leaders, they were a great bunch of people. You didn't really want to be sort of with them. If you want to be friends with Jesus, then actually the last thing you should maybe be is a religious leader, because they kind of were missing Jesus. They were missing what he was about. out. They were too consumed with their rules and what they thought was right, that they were missing what was right in front of them. Now, we are not told where Jairus stood within this crowd. We don't know if he was at the centre of it and he was the one declaring that Jesus wasn't the Son of God and that actually this is not the way to do things and Jesus shouldn't be doing this, or whether he was on the outskirts of the crowd, sort of just looking in going, oh, I'm not quite sure. But we do know this is the crowd that he was associated with. This is the crowd that he was expected to be with. The crowd where when Jesus healed somebody on a Sabbath day, another synagogue leader gets all indignant and angry, as we can see in Luke 13, that they miss the miracle of the healing and focus on the fact of, but that's not the way it's done, that's not the right way to do things. They missed what Jesus was doing because of tradition says this, rules state that, etc., etc. These are the views that Jairus would have had, the conversations that he would have been in. But when Jairus' world collapsed, when his 12-year-old daughter is on her deathbed, he looks around those that he's positioned with. He looks around his own crowd and realises he's not going to get help from those people. Those people are not going to be the ones that can change his situation, but there is somebody that can change his situation. Somebody that can bring life where there is death. So he leaves his crowd. He leaves the people that he is associated with. He leaves the people that he's expected to be with, and he goes to find Jesus. He finds the crowd where Jesus is the centre. In some of the readings I did this week, I found a couple of quotes about who we're hanging around with. And one says, hang out with people who fit your future, not your past. I like that. Hang out with people who fit your future, not your past. Another quote stated, if you hang out with chickens, you're going to cluck. And if you hang out with eagles, you're going to fly. We need to be careful who we are hanging around with, who we are positioning ourselves with. Because like Jairus had to change his crowd, had to change who he positioned himself with, there are people that are listening to this message that need to look at who they've positioned themselves with and they need to make a change. Because you see, we need to make sure we are positioning ourselves where God is at the centre, where Jesus is at the centre. Because when we find where Jesus is, where we position ourselves around the people of God, where we position ourselves around people that acknowledge the greatness of our God, it changes situations. For Jairus, there's a couple of things that we can learn from his story when he repositioned himself to find where Jesus was. The first thing we can learn is it brings hope. It brings hope. When we position ourselves with the right people, when we position ourselves with the things of God, we find hope. Jairus started this story clinging onto the hope by the tip of his fingernails. His daughter was dying. He didn't have the answers. He couldn't change the situation. But there was a glimpse of hope. If he could find Jesus, if he could get Jesus to come into his situation, then maybe, just maybe, this situation could change. He held on to that tiny bit of hope for as long as he could. But then as we read the story, you see that he was left waiting because Jesus got caught up with the lady that had been bleeding and Jairus is there and he's having to wait, and we all know that waiting is not easy. And he's waiting for Jesus to come as he is in this place of turmoil, this place of hurt, this place where he's only holding on by the tips of his fingernails, and then the news comes, your daughter is dead. All hope that he had is now gone. Because what can he do? What he was longing for, what he was hoping for, has now gone. But you see, Jesus heard. Jesus heard when that news came. He heard him, and he comes and says, in verse 36, Jesus overhearing what Jesus said, do not be afraid, just believe. In other words, there's still hope. There's still hope. Just believe. Just trust. Don't be afraid. Trust and believe. It's like he was taking Jairus and saying, remember, you came here because you had hope. You came and found me because you had faith. And now just hold on. Hold on that little bit more. Hold on. Keep believing. I am here. Let's go. Let's hold on to this hope. And sometimes we can find ourselves in hopeless situations. But you know what? When we have positioned ourselves with Jesus, when we are with Jesus, when we've gathered around, got people around us that gather around us that have got the same heart going after Jesus, then there is hope where there seems no hope. We need to make sure we have Jesus at the centre. Because when Jesus is at the midst, when he's at the centre, there is hope. Our faith is encouraged and we will see situations turned around. In 2 Timothy 4 verse 17, it says, "But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and the Gentiles might hear it, and I was delivered from the lion's mouth. The Lord stood at my side and gave me strength." The Lord stood at my side and gave me strength. Let me tell you today, he is at your side. Yeah. Whether you feel it or not, whether you're like Jairus and you feel like your world is collapsing, where is Jesus? He's at your side. He's right there. Right there. He's there and he's telling you, just believe. Do not be afraid. Just believe. And we need to be a church that will declare that. A church that will say, do you know what? I don't know what's going on in this world. This is a crazy world to be living at the moment. But I know who stands next to me. And because of who stands next to me, because of who I'm positioning myself with, I know that I know that I know I can do this. That I can move forward. That I will overcome. That my situation will change. Because he stands next to us. If you remember nothing else today, remember that. He stands next to you. So Jairus learned that by positioning yourself with Jesus, it brings hope. The second thing is that you're not just a number in the crowd. You are not just a number in the crowd. It is estimated that right now there are, let me see if I can say this number, hang on. There are 8,045,311,447 people on this planet. Now that number is actually too small because I, several years back, did a mission where we worked with a gypsy community out in Albania who don't register any births and deaths. They're actually not allowed because the country don't want to admit that they even exist. And there's other people, you know, this is only what's registered, is what I'm saying. So this is just a number. We live, and there's quite a few people living at the same time as us. Over 8 billion people. And it can be easy to feel lost, a little bit lost in all of those numbers. To feel like, who am I in all of this? But have you ever seen one of those visuals where it kind of starts, where it's like you're in outer space and you can see the planet Earth? And then it zooms in to a part of the globe. And then it zooms in a little bit more into like a country. And then from that country it will zoom into like a town. Then it zooms into a street. Then it zooms into a house. And then it zooms onto a person. Do you get what I mean? Where you feel like you're right down there, but actually it zooms in and in and in and in and in. And you know what? I truly believe that God is speaking to somebody today where he's saying, it's you, I'm zooming in on you. You feel like you are just 1 in 8 billion people. You feel like you have no significance. But God has gone choo, 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 choo. And he sees you. He sees you because you are not just a number. You are not just a number on this planet, a number in a crowd. But he sees you. He knows what's happening in your life. He's interested in you. Now, I'm not a fan of crowds. They get too noisy for me. I kind of struggle, I don't know what it's called, but like spitting out sounds. So in a crowd, everything is just a big noise to me, and I really find it hard to hear what people are saying. And because of that, I can sometimes feel overwhelmed, and I just want to get out of that crowd because it's just too much for me, because it's just too noisy, too much is going on, too busy. I don't like crowds. And I struggle to hear in a crowd. But Jesus, in this story, is in a crowd. We're told that this crowd is hustling and bustling, they're all sort of pushing into each other, that there's things going on, and ladies just been healed. People are chatting and going, oh my goodness, did you see what just happened over there? Did you see that lady's now healed? And do you think she really is? And there'll be all this chit-chat going on. And as all this chit-chat's going on, there's all this pushing and shoving is going on. that crowd, in that noise, what does Jesus hear? He doesn't hear people talking about the miracle just happening. He doesn't hear that, oh, this person's having sardines for lunch or whatever it may be. But he hears the news come to Jairus. And he says to him, hey, it's okay, because I'm standing next to you. I'm here with you. Jairus wasn't just a number in that crowd. Jesus heard what was happening. He saw what was happening, and he came alongside him. Jesus will do the same for us today. We live in a busy world, but he will come alongside us, and he hears what is being said. He knows what is happening in our lives, and he comes alongside us, and he says, don't be afraid, just believe, because he sees, he knows. It's the same for the woman who was bleeding. With her physical healing, that was done. She touched his robe, and because of her faith and because of the power of Jesus, she was healed. But you know what? That was only half of her healing. If Jesus had just let it go, the bleeding would have stopped, and praise God for that. But Jesus knew that more had to be happened. That's why I believe that he stopped in the crowd, and he said, who was that? Because he needed to have an encounter with this lady for her. Because you see, she had spent years being an outcast, years saying that she was dirty, years of people just not wanting to have anything to do with her because of her condition. And that would have had a toll on her. She would have felt worthless. Her self-esteem would be dragging along the floor. And Jesus said, you know what, that is my child, and I'm not having this. So he stops and he talks to her in the middle of that crowd. Even though there was a man saying, my daughter is dying, I need you to come now, Jesus just pauses and says, hey, who was that? Because he sees that lady. The lady that everybody else had outcast. The lady that everybody else was ignoring. The lady that everybody else was saying wasn't good enough and clean enough to even know. Jesus stopped and said, hey, I see you. I see you in the crowd. Let's have an exchange. And I want you to know that you are healed, and I want you to know that this is okay. And you know what? He also wanted the crowd to know that she is restored. No longer was she to be an outcast. No longer was she to be ignored, because she is restored. There was a whole other thing happening in that. Jesus wasn't just having a chit-chat, but he was seeing that woman, seeing her as everybody else dismissed her. Jesus said, I see you. Because Jesus sees us in the hustle and bustle. He sees us, and he knows exactly what we need. So we know that when we position ourselves with God, we have hope. When we position ourselves, we are not just a number in the crowd. And the third thing is, when we position ourselves with the people of God, it expands our story. Right bang in the middle of Jairus' story is the story of the bleeding lady. Jairus at the time probably saw her as a big hindrance, slowing things down. But in fact, she added to his story. Because now we celebrate the fact there was 2 healings that we know of that day. That people would have gone home that day going, let me tell you what Jesus done. He did this and he did this. There was more to the story. God's timing is perfect. Jesus took time with the bleeding lady, knowing that it was taking nothing away from Jairus' story, only adding to his experience. By the time Jairus returned home with Jesus, the mourners were already in place. The daughter had already died. For me, this is a little bit like in the story of Gideon in the Bible, where he's to go up against the biggest army of all times, and God brings his army right down to 300 men, because he's like, I want people to see that it's me that is giving you this glory. It is me that is giving you this victory. And this is what's happening here. That actually got to the point where no man could do anything to change the situation. It looked like it was over, but it is never over when God is on the case. So Jesus turns up at the right time and does a miracle that we're still talking about thousands of years later, because his timing was perfect. He knew what needs to be done and when. People add to our story. Don't dismiss others' journeys, but remember, we are together. Our stories go together. We add to each other's stories, and that's why it is so important that we do life together. That we are, as we've been saying, we believe with our whole hearts, church is family. You are family. We do life together because I can be part of your story, you can be part of my story. And our stories expand because we are together. Now, I think we should also note that Jesus didn't always allow the crowd to go with him. He stopped them going to Jairus' house, and then when he got to Jairus' house, and those that scoffed and those that sort of laughed at the fact that Jesus thought she was just sleeping, he got rid of them. He got rid of the ones that weren't believing. He got rid of the ones that were being negative. And sometimes in life, we need to reposition ourselves away from the naysayers, from those that say this can't happen, from those that say, oh, you're stupid to believe that, oh, you can't do that, and start putting doubts in our minds. That sometimes we just have to go, do you know what, you stay here. You stay here, but I'm going to go the rest of the way with Jesus. Because we need to make sure we've positioned ourselves together and with Jesus. And as we move forward, that we do so giving honour to our God. In Hebrews 10, verse 23 to 25, it says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how we spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And then if we read the same verse, but this time from the Message Bible, it says, let's do it. I like that. Let's do it. Full of belief, confident that we are presentable inside and out. Let's keep a firm grip on the promises that keep us going. He always keeps his word. And let's see how effective we can be in encouraging love and helping others. Not avoiding worship together as some do, but spurring each other on, especially as we see the big day approaching. I love it. I love it when it says, let's do this. Let's have that actually. Let's do this, church. Let's do this. And then it says, let's see how effective we can be in encouraging love and helping each other out. Let's be inventive how we do it. Let's sometimes step out of our comfort zone, step out of how we will always happen this way, but we're inventive in it. That, it might be that we invite somebody around, or we decide that we're going to just hang out at Roe Park and see what happens, and see who we can talk to at Roe Park, whatever it may be. But let's be people that are committed to meeting together, committed to being around the people of God, to be in places where Jesus is at the centre, so that we can know the hope that we have in situations. That we know that we're not just a number in the crowd, and that our story is expanded because we're doing it together. Church, we are powerful, do you know that? We are mighty, not because of us, but because of the God that we serve. And because of that, let's do life together. Let's commit. Let's say, do you know what? Let's do this. Let's be people that have Jesus at the centre, and then we go out and we're inventive in the way that we show love, in the way that we get alongside other people, so that we can expand their story as well. We're on this journey together. Have Jesus at the centre, and let's go forward. I'm going to pray for us as a church, just that we rise up to this challenge, that we rise up and say, do you know what, I'm in. I'm going to position myself around the people of God, and I'm going to go for it, knowing that there is hope, knowing that I'm not just a number in the crowd, knowing that my story is expanded by those that I let in. And as I know, being careful which voices I let have an influence on me, like Jesus when he stopped the crowds. But we go for it, knowing Jesus is at the centre. Let's pray. Yeah, Jesus, I just thank you today. I thank you that you did the journey for us. I thank you that you've gone before us, that you have set the example so brilliantly for us. And I just pray today, in 2023, that Grace Community Church, we hear your calling, that we position ourselves with you at the centre, so that we can live this life, a God-purposed life, fulfilling what you have put in our lives, to our full ability, knowing that you have gone before us. knowing that you stand next to us. You are cheering us on. You are praying for us as we're doing it. So we just pray for a boldness to come upon us, for an excitement to come upon us, for a passion to come upon us that will cause us to go out knowing that you are with us. Lord, I pray you'll help us just to do life together, that we know that this is where we are positioned. This is our family. This is where we can grow and we can help other people grow. This is where you have called us. So Father God, rise us up. Speak to us about where you want us to go, what you want us to do, how we can do this better for you, so that we can be your faithful servants, just doing as you've asked. We give you all the glory. We thank you with our whole hearts. We thank you, we thank you, we thank you for Grace Community Church. We thank you for your church throughout this land, Father God, where people are positioning themselves with you at the centre to declare your praise. Rise us up. Let us have a voice that is louder than this world, a voice that will just come in and bring peace into situations where there is fear, that will bring guidance when people are lost. A voice where people can say, I heard Jesus. Because those people that are positioned with Jesus, those people that are positioned themselves with God at the centre, rose up. We thank you. We thank you for what's coming. Almighty God. Amen. So church, I finish today by asking, who are you positioning yourself with? I'm excited. Did you know? God's doing stuff. He really is. And I truly believe, as we do this together, it's going to be right. It's going to be right. Now, stay around.